All right, everyone, welcome back. Thank you for sticking around for our third segment today. I'm excited to welcome my colleague, Julia Jones, who is a former admissions officer at Brandeis. Hi, Julia.
Hey, Beth, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. And thanks for joining. Our segment now is very important because we're talking to seniors who have not started. And before the break, I referred to them as last minute, but the reality is it is only mid-November.
Right.
Most schools have deadlines in January 1 or even later. Plenty have them even later. So even though it feels a little like, oh my goodness, you guys are behind the eight ball because we have so many students who have already sent in applications, the actual reality is it's not so bad, right? Is that what's your take on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, part of it is, time this year is sort of doesn't really have a lot of meaning for us,
Yes.
but it's not too late at all. And I think especially this year in the unique circumstances, I think colleges are actually pushing, some of them are pushing deadlines back too, but even so, yeah, even in a normal year, this would not be too late at all. So,
Yep, I'm
yeah.
agreeing with that. All right. So with that in mind, though, these seniors are on a shortened timeline. So what's your advice? And I should share with everyone that Julia oversees our college list creation here at College Coach. So she is right, particularly well positioned to answer this one. But what if they don't even have a list yet? What advice do you have about that, aside from going back and listening to segments where we've talked about how to put a list together? How do you
Sure.
do it quickly?
Right. Well, yeah. And I think it is, while it's not too late, you can't, take your time. You have to really, be efficient and I think you can use a lot of different tools that are out there. So I think you have to really at some point be aware, okay, what am I looking for? What are the criteria? And then just dive in. And in some ways, again, this year, being able to do virtual tours and do research online will help you, not wasting time traveling or planning trips to visit colleges, which isn't possible. So
Yes.
so again, it's being able to, use your guidance counselor and your high school resources to determine what schools are going to be possible, and then also, research online and really start to not just looking at what schools are going to be good fits, but then also at the same time you can be researching what are their deadlines, what are the things that you're going to need to do to actually apply. So it's kind of
Right.
doing a little bit of combination research.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think paying attention to those deadlines is going to be key. So if the vast majority of students will have already submitted their applications before you've even gotten your application package ready, maybe that's not a school for you. Although, to your point, this year a lot of schools have pushed deadlines. So that is something to consider. All right, advice for these students as they're filling out their applications, anything particular to think about there?
Well, I mean, I think really making sure again that you're filling out all of the application materials, looking for those sort of essay questions or additional requirements
Yes.
to what I've seen as a trend is that there's sometimes those hidden essays or hidden requirements that you don't know until you fill out certain sections of an application. So really going through and kind of doing a sweep as you're filling it out to make sure and what do you need to do? What do you need to write? Is it just the one essay? Are there multiples? If you're applying as an art student or something where you're sending extra things, what are the requirements for portfolios and the like? So
Right.
yeah.
And actually, this speaks to something that I was going to talk about later, but it feels very natural to fit it in here, which is the importance of organization if you are starting in mid-November, right? So what's some advice as you're doing those sweeps? What tips do you have for students about getting organized to do this process?
Yeah, and I think this is the case whatever you're starting, but
Yes.
always when you have your list, then it's about, so you know where you're applying. Now you got to figure out how and what are the deadlines and what are the essays that you have to write, and so really putting together like a spreadsheet or some kind of a tracking document, but a spreadsheet makes the most sense. School, what application platform, what are the essays, what are the deadlines, what are the other requirements, and you can pull that pretty easily from the applications or the school websites. But then it's really about looking at, okay, how many essays do I actually have to write? Can I use one essay for more than one school? Like all of those little pieces that if you keep it in one document, it's your roadmap, it's the way to avoid all those little surprises happening and things slipping through the cracks.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you are doing things on the fly a little bit, that's the danger more than anything. You have the time to get this done. You don't have the time to miss things. because you're a little bit up against it. Whereas if you thought you were done with something back in August, and then you were able, or in September, and then you go back to your list, you have to, oh, I forgot to do this. Okay, great. Now I'll worry about this. Or you might miss a financial aid deadline back in September, but then you're rechecking everything. And now you're like, oh, can't forget that. Got to get that in there because the deadline has not yet passed. The
Yeah.
longer you wait, the more it is that there is a chance that you might miss something like this. I think the other advice that I would share related to getting organized is you need to organize your time, right? So we have breaks that are coming up. You have weekends every week. There are 2 days where you maybe stay in your house again, but instead of having to be on Zoom for school, you are just sitting around. And while it's very tempting to just lay around, you need to make the most of your weekends. You need to make the most of Thanksgiving break. You're going to need to make the most of your holiday break. And if you don't make the most of that time, it's going to be tougher to get this done in a timely way. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, having even the way that school is set up now for many students, if you are, doing more remote learning, you may have more time, to do that work, but you still have to plan it. You can't just, you can't just wing it and hope that it's all going to happen the night or the week before, because that's really not going to be the best scenario at all.
Yeah, no, and I would even consider build it in like it's homework that you
Yeah.
have, because I think your point is a good one. You may not have as much homework as that you would have normally had. You may not be going to sports after school. You probably aren't. Some of you are, but so all of that time that would have been taken up by sports, maybe you've filled it with something else, but is it really as time consuming? Can you build this in? If you are literally just putting your list together right now, can you do an information session a day or a tour a day? You could never normally do that if you had, but you could do a tour in California and one in Massachusetts same day, maybe
Yeah.
even, right?
Yeah.
So you got to maximize your time if you're going to get this done and do it well.
It also bodes well to, when you talk about putting a list together,
Mhm.
We give this advice all the time of like, okay, just because you can apply technically to 15 or
Yes.
20 colleges, you shouldn't. And this is even, be realistic about how much time it's going to spend. And so if you're looking at the more schools you add, the more time it's going to take you, and you just may not have the time to really do justice to as many schools. So it's really paying attention to that.
Yes, and actually that brings me to what I consider the thing that takes the most time, and that is essays. And you already mentioned a great point about collect all the essay information in one place and figure out how many do I actually need to write, or is there overlap, right? What other advice do you have for students who have not even started writing any of their essays yet?
Right. Well, I think that, starting obviously with maximizing your work here. So if you're, working on the common application or essays that you're likely going to be using across the board for most schools, start there, and really, and then work out from there too, and really making sure that you're answering each question, that you're also, answering each question in a unique way too, so that you're not, and that's why sometimes knowing what you have to write will help you, so that if you want to write your essay about why, you're passionate about business, but if you are going to have to answer that question on a supplemental essay, you may not want to do that, because then you're going to have to, kind of find a way to make each one unique. So it is really having a plan.
Yeah, exactly. If you've written your main essay, I think that's a great example. Then for that school, you're going to have to
Yeah.
take from your main essay and probably write a brand new main essay. And one goal I would have if you're starting a little bit later is do not put yourself in a situation where you're going to have to write more than one primary essay if you could possibly avoid it. And then what about test scores? So many students don't necessarily have them this year, and many colleges are not requiring them. But if you do have them, what do you need to think about in relation to making sure you get those sent out if you're using them?
Right. Well, I think you have to figure out again how long, really building into the schedule the fact that it can take anywhere from 2 or more weeks to
Yes.
get those scores back. And there's so much uncertainty even with that sometimes too.
Mhm.
So deciding whether or not you're going to send them, if you have them, obviously that's a big part of it too, and that can be part of your spreadsheet, your organizational tool.
Yes.
And then also, really getting a sense from colleges how late is too late? You know, your scores may come back after the deadline, and in many cases that's okay this year. But you know, most schools have been very open about saying, okay, yeah, we absolutely have to have them by this date, and some of them will even give you suggestions on, hey, we don't necessarily need them officially right away. You can self-report. You can, you know, send us a screenshot with your test results if they come in super late. So I think it's just knowing how, you know, knowing what colleges are going to do, and building that into your plan though.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think that building it into the plan is really important, because even just right, the colleges getting the scores can take some time. It shouldn't. It's an electronic transfer, but the way
Yeah.
some admissions offices are set up, it doesn't always go. The timing doesn't always happen as quickly, and so you want to build that into your thought process. Lastly, but definitely not least importantly, arguably most importantly, is to be looping in your teachers and counselors, right? So what are
Yeah.
some important things that they need to be aware of as you are working on these applications at this point?
Right. Well, first of all, I mean, if you haven't, you need to be asking your teachers for recommendations. One would assume and hope that you have, and that you've met with your guidance counselor and started that process. If not, ASAP.
Got to do that.
But
Yep.
but I think at the same time, then you have to kind of know what the procedure is, what your counselor, what that protocol is. But really, most importantly, they need to know your list in whatever way they want you to tell them. They need to know your deadlines, what schools you're applying and when, so that they are able to get their piece of the application to the colleges around the same time. So. And some counselors and some teachers have guidelines. They might want a couple of weeks notice. So again, the sooner you have your list and you know where and all of the, you know, the ins and outs, you want to kind of loop them in and keep them, you know, give them as much notice as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And as much thanks as you can. You've waited a little bit, and that's your personal reality. Your counselor has been working with students all fall. And so if you come in at the very last minute and you haven't been paying attention to the deadlines that the counseling staff has set for all these pieces to be completed, they may not be as excited about it or take on the same sense. They're going to do their absolute. One thing I know about all the counselors in this country and everywhere is that they're there to help you through this process. And so while you may feel like they're not making it as much of a priority as you would like them to, I think it's really important for you to recognize that they have a lot of students who they are serving. And so if you just kind of come in and you haven't been paying attention to their deadlines, that's not ideal. So understand, right, what your school is looking for.
Absolutely.
Any final thoughts for our seniors who are just kind of getting going in this process?
Yeah. Well, I think I would just say, you know, take the time that you need. You know, you don't have to also scramble and rush and worry, oh my gosh, I have, you know, I find that some students are doing that too. Really, you know, pay attention to and just have a schedule and be organized. I think that's
Yes.
probably at this point one of the most important things that you can do. At any time in the process, but especially when you're starting, perhaps, you know, in the middle of the fall like this. I think it's organization is the key to having this done, and so that you can do it with as minimal stress as possible. You're going to have stress, but I think the more organized you are, the better it'll be.
Absolutely. Julia, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you to all my guests. Next week, I'm back and we're talking supplemental essays for Notre Dame, and we are answering your questions. Send them to us via Facebook, Instagram, or gettingin.voiceamerica@gmail.com. Again, gettingin.voiceamerica@gmail.com. And don't forget, we are here every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern and 1 p.m. Pacific. Yay!